So in this video, we're going to do the supervised learning as another example. It's called Iris classification. So in this example, we're going to take another example other than the linear regression by using the Iris dataset that we mentioned earlier. So how do we, our question basically is give a model trained on a portion of the iris data, what's the performance of the trained model, how well it can predict the remaining uh, labels or data. So for this task, we're going to use an extremely simple generative model known as Gaussian Laï Bayes. Gaussian Laï Bayes. Everybody probably still remember what's the Bayes probability model, right? So you use those Bayes model. You can process by assuming that each class is drawn from an axis-aligned Gaussian distribution. So Gaussian distribution. So and because it is so fast and has no hyperparameters to choose, Gaussian Laï Bayes is often a good model to use as a baseline classification. So before we use others, let's just take a look how do we use this one. So as we mentioned before, so we're going to split the whole data into two sets. One is called the training data, the other one is called the test data. Normally the training data is about 80% or so, and the test data is probably 20% of the test data. 80 or more percent will be the training data, and 20 or less will be the testing data. So this can be done by hand, but it's going to be more convenient by just use one of the utility function called the train test utility function. It will do that split for us. So first of all, let's prepare the data. So since this is a different file, I basically copy those the data we have, the lines of Python code we have in the previous video. So in this one, I still use the Seaborn and import the Iris data, and then we have the plot of all those series, and then I have the x and the y, x and the y iris. So we have the according to the species, and then we have the x and the y. So this one is for x is we dropped the species. For y we have the species. So y species is like our label. So you can think this is actually our category. So we have three categories, right? Because iris data only have three types of flowers. It's give you all kinds of features of that flower based on the four actually features you should be able to tell the species. So y-axis actually becomes our labels. So once we have that, then we're going to split. We're going to do the train test split by using our x iris and y iris. So x iris and y iris is basically the full set. So we're going to have a random state equals to 1. We're going to split those data. And so once we split it, you will notice that for the split, I have x test and y test. I have x train and a y train. So that means we're going to do the training and test. So again, here we're going to as a step one, we import the model, and then we actually make an object of the model. So instantiate the model, and then we can train the model by call the fit function method to train the data. Once we train it, we can actually predict. We actually can predict the test x of test data, so we can get a wise model. Now, finally, we can use the accuracy score utility to kind of measure how well this training is done. So we can actually use the accurate score to find, and we find this is doing pretty well. It has a 0.97% accurate. It's 97% accurate. So it's very accurate. You can erase all those output and run this again. Probably take a little while, but overall we don't have a large set of the data for this ARIES data anyway. So it's not going to be super long time. So earlier we just mentioned the supervised learning examples. What if we're doing some unsupervised learning? For example, we can do some we can do some clustering, for example. For unsupervised learning, there are two types. One is the clustering. The other one is called so those are the clustering. So we can put them into different classes. All right. Another one is actually dimensionality reduction. So we can leave that for the future, but here is what we're going to do as a class dimensionality. So you can do that as well. You can do the clustering as well. So for the dimensionality, it's a typical unsupervised learning problems. So let's take a look at reducing the dimensionality of the ARIES data set, and then we can visualize it. So it's pretty much the same thing. The task of dimensionality reduction is to ask whether there is a suitable lower dimensional representation. There's a less features that can actually return the essential features of the data. And then we can reduce that the number of features to a smaller size of features. So we're going to save more time to do the feature calculation. So we will use a principal component analysis, PCL. It's a classic dimension reduction model, which is a fast and linear dimensional reduction technique. So let's use PCA. Again, it's a principal component analysis. Principal component. So it's the same step. The step one is we choose a model. The second one is we make the model object. Then we fit it, we train it, and then we actually call transform. So we can transform the x-iris, and then we get the x2D, transform the data into 2 dimensions. Then we can have PCA1, PCA2 by specifying that. Then we can plot PCA1, PCA2, and use the hue as a species, and the data will be ARIES, and we can fit. We can actually see the plot of this. That will clearly see we have 3 groups, right? This is group 1, group 2, and group 3. So that will be typical classification. This is PC1, PCA1, PCA2. And this is a smaller feature than that. So now we only got a lot smaller. Originally it was like four features. Now I only can use like only two features. Unsupervised learning, the last type of the unsupervised learning is called iris clustering. So we're going to again use the Gaussian mixture, GMM. It's called the Gaussian mixture model, a typical clustering algorithm to find the distinct groups without referring any label. So this is unsupervised clustering. So let's use the model, and so the same thing. Step one, we actually choose the model. Second, we make the model object. We instantiate the model hyper with hyperparameters. In this one, we have the covariance type as full, and then the components will be 3. So those are the parameters we set, and then we're going to use the test data, use the whole X data as a test data. So we fit the data. Here notify that we didn't specify the Y, because the Y is going to be the label. We are going to use the Y label that the model, the GMM model, is going to give us what is going to be the label for all the X's. So all the X's. With that, then I can simply say iris cluster equals the y underscore GMM, YGMM. Then I can plot the column of clusters, so I can then get the 3 types of data. You will notice some of those points for this this type, class number 2, it's wrongly placed because they're so close to this cluster, so it is kind of mixed together. But that's overall it's okay. It's okay because the majority data are actually accurate. So this is how do we do. So in this lab, we actually showed you how do we do prediction, how do we do for linear prediction, linear classification, and then discrete classification, and then we showed you all the 4 types, and it also include the unsupervised learning, clustering, and reducing the dimensionality. So that's all the 4 types we showed you, and that's all for this video.